Welcome back to Actuality of Being. I'm Phil, and obviously I am recording a video in my truck today. And if you are wondering why that is, you probably don't have kids. Which kind of brings me back to why it's been so long since a video. For anybody who's interested in the content that I put out, I certainly appreciate the patience and the messages and comments and emails that I've gotten about how long it's been. There's a lot in the works. I've been learning some animation software, which as a category is completely new to me. It's been fun, but there is kind of a learning curve, and there are actually several videos that are well underway. But I got a lot of requests, not only for a video, but to cover some specific topics. And I guess the first thing that I want to say is I'm recording a video in the car because I'm in front of my son's school and need to be here to pick him up in a half hour. Hopefully I can record this in a half hour. There's quite a bit I want to cover. But and I'm wearing my Dunder Mifflin Inc. t-shirt. And I hope that these things get something across. In a lot of the messages and emails that I get, and in the sessions and conversations I have, it comes up once in a while, kind of all too often, that I'm enlightened or a teacher or a guru or whatever. And I guess I mentioned this in the first video, but I just want to mention it again to be clear. I'm none of these things. If I'm doing anything, it's sharing, and if I'm doing it well at all, it's sharing to the tune of sending you back to your source, to the only real teacher, the only real guru. And I also want to say again, with the paperless, limitless paper in a paperless world shirt, the only thing I'm trying to be is a good husband and a good son and a good dad and a good friend. And I'd be much happier to just be a friend than a guru, etc. I think that's kind of misplaced, but it's also, you know, complimentary and flattering, and I get it and I appreciate it. But the point is that this spirituality is arguably, it's arguable that that's the point. If you have not realized God or infinite being or love, then yeah, that's very much the point. But even at that, I guess it's just opinion, so it's hard to say. But even at that, that's not the point. It certainly isn't the point if it's bypassing, if it's going to spirituality or seeking at the expense of ignoring anything in life, any challenges, any feelings, any emotions, anything. The point is the life. So I just want to be clear on that, and be very upfront and clear that I'm not sitting in a cave or on a mountain making these videos. Far from it. I have a very blessed and full and fortunate and thriving and active life, and that's what it's all about. And I can't say this clearly enough. Make it about that. Make a dream board. Put what you want to experience in this life. Anything and everything's big and small that comes to mind. Put it on your dream board and keep that thing front and center in your home or your living area, your bedroom, your space. Don't let it be on the wall or tucked away. Keep it front and center so all those things are top of mind. It makes a huge difference. And one of the animation videos that I've been working on is about the dream board and law of attraction. So that's to come. The video today, or the inspiration of sharing some things today, came at the suggestion of a dear friend, and it kind of also brought up a couple of comments from previous videos from YouTube, etc., and some Skype, Zoom messages and emails that I get about some things that I want to address and talk about, like infinite mind and finite mind, and solipsism, the dark night of the soul, and nihilism. All the fun stuff. the first question that probably comes to mind is, did I experience these? So am I speaking from direct experience? Yes, and then actually no. And that obviously that sounds conflicting, but I think that will make more sense by the end of the video. I also want to say, before I kind of get into what I want to cover here, and I have some notes in front of me, that in one way, if you're not experiencing these things, nihilism, solipsism, dark night of the soul, etc., if you're not experiencing these, if you've not heard of these, in one way, I kind of strongly suggest that you turn this video off and don't watch it, because I don't want to plant any seeds. Yet at the same time, I can acknowledge and understand that there might be some information that could potentially be useful, not only to you in the future, but someone you might know that might be experiencing these things, that you might not only be able to help them with, or maybe share this video, or just be able to hold space, so to speak, just to be there for them. But maybe you encounter such a situation and they don't even know how to put what they're experiencing in context, and you might not have either, and this might help. So it's kind of, you know, take it how you will. But these aren't the most pleasant topics. They are, but it's the nature of the misunderstanding and of misunderstandings from life, from your whole life, that empty out. That sort of, in a way, on the other side of it, it's realized that it was all good, all goodness, all for good. But I digress. Filter as you may. I just thought these things are worth mentioning up front. So in getting into these things like solipsism, the dark night of the soul, and nihilism, the last thing I want to acknowledge, or kind of the introduction to these, is it's a weird position. So if you just realize suddenly that everything is love, and all there is unconditional, infinite, eternal being, or God, or love, and that's what this everything is. I don't know if it's like this for everyone every time, so to speak, but sharing specifically with the spheres, going back to my first video, it happens. It doesn't become an interest, it doesn't become a passion, it literally is happening, and it's very unpreventable. That might sound weird, it might make sense, I don't know, but I say that because it's like making a video that, the videos that I've made and sharing this, then it's like if you made a video about love and then people said, now you need to make a video about hate. Well, only one of them is actual, but nonetheless it kicks up some emotions and some things with some topics, so it makes sense. But I just also want to mention that, so that you're hopefully seeing this content in that light. The last thing I want to do is plant seeds or ideas about solipsism and nihilism, but if you're experiencing it, this video might help you out. So a little bit of preface. Unconditional love appears as reality. In the most literal sense, love is all there is. Love isn't just an emotion. Love is not a thing. Love is majestic, mystical, mysterious, pure magic, and ineffable. So these, I mean, the words are just pointers, as they say. Love, a word that gets that seems to fit, and that I've heard often, is that reality, or appearance, perception, is infinite mind. So unconditional love appears as, it doesn't change into and be something different, but itself appears, and that's often referred to as infinite mind, or the mind of God. that appearance, specifically the appearance of what's called experience, or the experience of a point of view, is an appearance, the actuality of which is love. There is ultimately no mind of any kind, finite or infinite. There is the apparent thought that there is. So I acknowledge there's sort of a full circle. There's a before this revelation and before this understanding and after. So obviously I'm kind of sharing to the perspective of the before, because if you're well aware of who or what you are it's highly likely that you are not watching this video. So these words point that they don't define. The appearance, that of two spheres, the world, which is a somewhere, so there can be experience, and the lens, which is the means of experiencing or knowing that experience. The world is one sphere, one same shared world or experience, an appearance of love, and it is experienced as if objective, because through the lens, experientially, it is objective. The lens is, the sphere is an appearance of love. Lens and sphere are interchangeable in the way that I use the words. Ultimately, as the world and the lens are an appearance, the world is not at all objective, but is an objective experiential appearance, we might say. A person is born as, again, words don't define, so these are all just pointing. A person is born simultaneously in the world and as a lens, which could loosely be called a finite mind, because one is appearing as two. So there aren't separate selves born. There is one infinite self, and even the term infinite self take somewhat loosely. There is the enlightened one, or the infinite one, appearing as two, and ultimately these spheres are not two separate occurrences which happen simultaneously, but the entire appearance. It's very hard to explain or even point to, but you might say it's a singularity, or if you were thinking of a movie, both spheres might be the reels, or if you were thinking of it as a stage and actors, experiences there is an experience with only one and not the other. So they're not exactly separate, but one appears as two, so that there is this. Just like a baby looks at its parents, or looks like its parents and some relatives, the lens or finite mind, so too is indicative of parents and some relatives, so to speak. This is why we even use words like relative, relatives, or relativity. They point not to what is actual, but what is a relative to you appearance. Relative to that which indeed is eternally and infinitely actual. Then the baby, which is also referred to, and I'm just using a lifetime as a way to explain some things here, the baby, which also not coincidentally is referred to as an infant, as in infinity, as in no ego, no identification, no beliefs in that regard yet. No belief contrary to simply just being, or being the being that it is. Adopts views, beliefs, interpretations, misunderstandings, misidentification, just like those in its apparent environment. Lightly speaking, if you are looking for some love via some humility, watch a 2-year-old and realize that you will never be that enlightened. But maybe I'm wrong. Check and see. As a child grows, an identity is weaved and created based on identifying as physical and separate, because those around the child do not realize who they really are. I know I didn't, so to speak. that they are the eternal infinite being appearing as reality, or the two spheres, and the child is innocently conditioned, deluded, infinite being is diluted. Whatever word works for you, ego, forgetting, whatever works for you to get the point across is the term for you. As the child becomes an adult, the discord between thought and feeling is felt, also known as suffering. The adult either goes the way of that's just how it is, or that's just how I am. I'm sure you have heard that once or twice or 1,000 times as well. Or the adult listens to the intuition and feeling and inspects the discord and suffering and begins to choose to put feeling first, well above being right, which is to say believing thoughts which don't feel good and believing that they're true just because that's what they were told, or because that's what everybody else believes, or that's what they thought of one day and it seemed like it must be true. Such is the ism of solipsism. What makes it difficult is it's just a belief, and is most often intense spiritual ego, which could be said to be realizing or seeing through the falsity of the materialist paradigm, that of separate objects or separation at all, only to later experience the reattachment or believing of thoughts which label and seem to define, and in this sense hijack, infinite being right out from under itself, as one unfortunately slips into the identity, if you will, as the knower, or the one who knows, or the one who is not parallel, or as the Bible says, the fallen angel, the one which refuses to be parallel or on par or on the same quote level with the whole or the all of mankind, the one who holds itself apart, namely above others. I want to take a minute and sort of dive into that, because I think it's worth mentioning, because that of the sessions that I have, a lot of the people that I talk to are coming from religious backgrounds, and they feel that there's a as if they need to leave a place and go to a new place or something. It takes a while to grasp that it's they're all saying the same thing. Not literally every religion, but by and large, those that come to mind, religions and science, they're all pointing to the same realization. It depends if you take it figuratively or literally. So Christianity, as an example, there is a story to it, and I don't mean it to belittle it, but I kind of am putting it this way for the sake of time, that the generalization of the story is that there is a God, that there are angels, that there is a fallen angel, a devil, and that there is an experience of eternal heaven or hell. If you take that figuratively, it sounds like it sounds very much like, here is our beliefs and our system or organization, and if you're interested in subscribing to this dogma and want to be part of this community, it's called Christianity. If you take it literally, though, and by taking it literally instead of figuratively, it's not an abstract story when you take it literally. It's said very, very directly to you. You might say the story, the whole story, the only purpose that it even serves. And I'm not Christian, and I'm not Christian. I'm not an advocate for any religion, and I'm not against any religion. Again, at this point, it's as far as I'm concerned, it's really all the same, and all roads lead to one place. But if you take it very literally, what you're being told is that, in fact, there is a God, and that there are, in fact, angels, and that there is the experience of a heaven or a hell, and that this hell and suffering, by and large, and so many headaches and troubles and difficulties that arise in life, but really are unnecessary, but also innocently arise. It's very literally telling you that this devil is the one that's related to all this hell and suffering, etc. It's not figurative. There's not a hell realm in some dimension or something. They're very much telling you this. Different people use different terminology. I prefer terminology of that there is no separate self, and aligning thought with feeling, leading to self-realization and discovering the magic of reality with the dream board, when you see that what you put on it does indeed come into your life. And this video is an example of that. Hopefully you get the point on the Christianity. Again, it's just an example using figurative versus literal, but it's something to contemplate and think about. Solipsism, hopefully you connect those dots and see how these unfortunately relate, or fortunately you connect the dots and see how they relate, and it's helpful. The dark night of the soul. Upon inspecting beliefs, specifically about meaning and about identity, and really coming to terms with that the word belief basically points to or means not true or not truth. Going back to the life and the baby analogy, the adult starts letting go of beliefs and believing what they were told, which never resonated with them in the first place. And by resonated, I mean it just didn't feel aligned, it didn't feel good. As the beliefs are inspected and let go, ultimately so is the identity. The adult has become attached to beliefs about themselves, about who they are, about separation, etc. And so this letting go can feel like loss or mourning or sadness or sorrow. Many emotions may arise as the beliefs and identity are let go. These might be resentments or animosity held from relationships which weren't processed and are yet to be understood, which could very well be said to need to be processed and understood, depending. That word need is a very, very potentially tricky word. So depending upon, of course, the one aware of or experiencing these emotions and this letting go. Letting go of beliefs and identity could be thought of as removing a band-aid, as an analogy, and there are methods and substances which support the ripping the band-aid off. There are also methods and substances which support a peeling it away slowly. There is no wrong or right here. It's all preference and opinion. You do you. I'll add a bias here only because it could be a helpful insight. Solipsism, nihilism, etc. In my experience, if you will, has never been seen in circles or in regard to ways, methods, practices, or teachers who implement and preach daily practices of well-being leading to awakening, like meditation, yoga, breath work, etc. Not to imply that there is a direct correlation, but it does seem that again, from meeting with hundreds, maybe thousands of seekers and people realizing at this point that there's a direct causation to psychedelic trips. So I need to turn the camera off, head home, and I will pick up on that note. Hi, sorry for the break there. Back home. I guess it wasn't really a break at your end though, was it? Where were we? Looking at my notes. Oh, psychedelics, what a cliffhanger. So this is, the reason I use the word bias is this is sort of just from one perspective, that I'm even making this association that having had an office meeting with people at a yoga place and talked with different yoga instructors, even some of the teachers that I won't name that most of you are familiar with, having conversations with them, I've just found there to be an apparent correlation. I'll try to talk about why that is, or why I think it is, if there is a correlation at all. But first, am I saying don't use psychedelics? Hell no, I am not saying don't use psychedelics. Am I saying that you should use psychedelics? Hell no, I'm not telling you that you should use psychedelics. It's such a can of worms. I'll just say I have, so to speak, and if you do, you had better put it off for at least a week or two and do a whole lot of diligence and a whole lot of research. I'm available to chat in a session if you are interested, and also you can email me, message me anytime if there's anything that I can help with. But again, there might be dots to connect there. The suddenness of psychedelics is kind of the pro, but isn't, but can be interpreted that way, experienced that way, that the downside is the suddenness. And it's not really, I wouldn't attribute this to a substance, to a psychedelic. Lightly speaking, it's as if the substance itself is truth. So if there's issues, it's what it brings up, which is in discord with truth being love. Hopefully that makes sense. I probably will do more, do some kind of episode with more specifics in the future. But I am suggesting, if you are experiencing, not just thinking about, learning about, or conceptualizing about, but experiencing solipsism or nihilism, at least be open-minded to consider that could be a big part of the experience, that just through meditation, yoga, breath work, etc., awakening is a much more slower momentum. I want to say over time, but it's kind of the paradox of time, whereas psychedelics are very eye-opening very quickly. For some, that's no problem at all. For others, it brings up issues, past issues, identity issues, things that are difficult to let go of, past traumas that haven't been fully processed. You can even completely see so far prior to that, it's kind of like it can become its own problem in its own way, that you can see completely prior to it, feel as though you're completely transcended of it and free of it, and then over time slowly it can inch its way back in until those misunderstandings, misidentifications, and that there even is a past or an identity. And again, stuff for a future video that I don't want to get too much into now, or I mean, it's very related to what I'm covering here, but in a specific way, probably stuff for future videos. Nihilism. Nihilism is most often said to be a sudden loss of meaning, or a falling into meaninglessness, resulting in suffering in regard to the living of life. Since from this perspective, life is now meaningless. Again, a slow unfolding of seeing through meaning, or realizing you're the creator, creating meaning, feels very liberating. A sudden seeing through this can be profoundly shocking. But I'm thinking, what if that's your situation right now, though? Or what if you are experiencing that in the future and you think to maybe watch this video again? One way to explain this is the word purification. The theme is, it's not a problem. It's going to seem like it's a problem. If there are scars uncovered, traumas that surface, my suggestion in this process of purification, which ultimately is seen to not have happened, but again, this is the only intention or point of this video is if you're on the other side of this full circle, so to speak, and it's yet to come that this might be helpful. But in a word, expression is really, really key. And you can go to my website, actualityofbeing.com. There's a tool section with different suggestions on how to express, how to think, anything from poetry to journaling, etc. I found those things to be very, very helpful, which is why I took the time to even make a website and put them up there. So you might find them to be helpful as well. Give them a once over and see. But there's a theme that it's not a problem. So in relative language, as the body mind is purifying, it's emptying out all the old perspectives and beliefs, all the misunderstandings that led to misidentification. And as these emotions arise, and I would phrase it that they come up and out, because it feels very much like an upward and an outward emptying. The mind sometimes gets all the focus or attention instead of the emotions and feeling. So rather than expressing them, which is a method or way of releasing them, and then understanding just kind of fills in, sometimes thoughts about meaningless are focused on and essentially blamed for what is really emotional conditioning that is coming up and out, as it does in any case, just much faster in some cases, and can be overwhelming. And it can be difficult also because when we are believing our thoughts and identified, while expression is the releasing and is the key, and understanding always fills in and follows, there's often a certain reluctance to talk because the thoughts are already attached to or believe the narrative, of it. The way I feel is because of X, Y, or Z. That can be very, very strong and overwhelming. So keep that in mind, that it's always just let the thoughts come and go, and don't suppress feeling, don't ignore feeling. If you blame, don't do it to somebody. You can do it about somebody, but don't do it to somebody, because it's only going to complicate things more. But expression really is the way to go and is the key. Just a thought on that, a note on that from direct experience. When that goes on, it should be thought of as like anything else, not thought of as some bigger existential thing as much as possible. Think of it as like if you just had a rough day and you were like expressing, venting, sharing, letting it out. Try to keep it in that same sector as much as possible. How to do that? People often say, it's a weird sentence to say, that there isn't the experience of thoughts, and that often gets misunderstood to mean that I somehow learned how to stop thoughts. So sometimes people ask, how do you stop thoughts? And it's not that you can't stop thoughts, and it's not that you can stop thoughts, but it's sort of a misunderstanding or a misappropriation of what thought is. How to, and I'll use quote fingers, how to stop thoughts is really just focusing on something else. So that can be literally anything else other than thoughts. Namely, what I would suggest is to just over and over, when you feel the suffering, the discord, you're not liking how you feel, is the simplest way to put it. It is thoughts that are kind of the catalyst of this. And just like there's a reluctance to express when we are sometimes angry or when these things are coming out, there can also be adherence to thoughts, as in I have to solve what I'm thinking about before I can feel better, before I can move on. It's very paradoxical or counterintuitive perhaps, but I suggest that thought followed by thought, followed by thought, followed by thought, forever. It never actually resolves thought, because one is staying focused on the same thing. It's like if you say don't focus on a pink elephant. You weren't even thinking of a pink elephant, and then I mentioned it, now you're thinking of it. It's the same thing. If I continue to say don't focus on it, it really is still focusing on it. So what do? You focus on other than thought, which is breathing, feeling, seeing, and hearing. So basically perception and feeling. And I would even be more specific that breathing is from the stomach, not the lungs. So letting your whole body, especially your waistline, just completely relax, taking big breaths, letting them out slowly. The systems of the body, if you will, respond to this, as in, oh, okay, everything's all right, and then the heartbeat goes down, and it's much easier to relax, and you might find the thoughts coming up again, whether they're about solipsism or nihilism or anything existential, or just someone in your past, etc. Again, my 2 cents on this is don't try to resolve it in thinking, because that creates more and more tension. It is okay to let it go. That isn't bypassing. Shifting your focus to breathing and feeling, we could say feeling the body, but just feeling that there is feeling, and to perception, seeing and hearing, such as going for a walk and feeling the sensation of the bottom of your feet, being very aware of that feeling and that sensation as you're walking, and just noticing thoughts, letting them go, putting your focus again on seeing and hearing. Not ultimately, in the simplest sense, this is really just being here now, being present. And then the thoughts that come up, what you start to notice is, it's as if the thoughts are trying to rope you into the past via the identifying with it, or rope you into more worry or anxiety, etc., about the future via your whatever, fill in the blank, which is subtle identity. And by letting thoughts come and go, focusing on breathing, feeling, seeing, and hearing, you're not going to, so to speak, a past or a future. You're remaining present. And what's inevitably realized, we could say ultimately realized, you are now. You are the present. You are presence. If I say try to go to a past and come back and tell me what it's like, or go to a future and then come back and let us know what it's like, it really draws out that the actuality is that there isn't a past or future. There's just this ineffable, words point to it like now, love, presence, being, etc. It's a tricky subject, because letting thoughts go does not mean bypassing your life. It doesn't mean following what you're interested in. It doesn't mean ignoring anything. It doesn't mean suppressing anything. It's kind of an inner world thing to do, if you will. And meditation is very good for this, every morning, especially before you engage in screens and people and whatever, because once it clicks that your superpower, just a way to say it, is letting go. Esther Hicks comes to mind. She uses the term rockets as in rockets of desire, like things that you from experience, you've realized that you want to create an experience. But I think if you sort of extrapolate that a bit and look at it like we're all rockets that launch from wherever it is that we start off and launch from, and we're basically shooting up, living a life, things are unfolding, very much like in the physics sense, a rocket. If there's a lot of attachment, you might say muck, whatever that is, extra weight to the rocket, it's not going to be excelling through what it desires to excel through. But if that rocket just, easy come, easy go, not much attachment, just enjoying the experience, and more realizing there's just this moment right now, and it's an ineffable miracle. Things tend to unfold for you in your life in the way that you want. Things do tend to just, as Esther so eloquently says, things just work out for you. Again, the dream board is very helpful in focusing on what feels good to you. But presence really is the key. And you might notice too that it seems like bypassing if you were to use a distraction. But when you're going through these things and they're coming up and out, rather than go into the distraction of existential rumination on solipsism or nihilism or a dark night or any of this, it can be easily said in my experience to do anything other than thinking about that, and that is not quite a distraction. It's actually allowing the body to process. It's allowing the emotions to process. So watching a movie that feels good, listening to music that feels good, the best possible thing really is anything creative or artistic. I think the word is transmutation, where you take the pain in your experience, and that is still in the identity, that still comes up as thoughts, and you pour it into whatever you like, some kind of art. It could be music, it could be painting, it could be nature watching. I mean, literally anything at all that's nature, that's creative, anything along those lines. Very ideal, because it's very connective and very presence oriented. I use, to make it painstakingly clear, I often use the example of Google imaging puppies to really drive home that if you're focused on thoughts or a subject that does not feel good, the tension just sort of increases, and people want to solve it before they can feel better. If you let go of it for any other, to put your attention on anything else, even if you just pull out your phone and Google image puppies, puppies have a sort of a heart-melting factor, and it takes your mind off of whatever was feeling bad, and it easily reminds you of that there is goodness, even if albeit slightly from looking at pictures of puppies. But anything other than focusing on what didn't resonate in the first place is the letting it go. It's a tricky thing. Again, if you have questions, feel free to comment or shoot them over to me. If you experience someone going through this, especially ruminating, feeling lost in meaninglessness, etc., hopefully this gives a little bit of insight to what they're going through, so that you might have some understanding, which leads to not trying to solve or advise, but just as they say, holding space, just kind of passively listening without getting too engaged, without judging, etc., etc. Just essentially just being there for somebody, and so that they are heard and can express, and maybe so they can be understood. But that's not quite as important as just an example that comes to mind is like a flower blooms with light. The flower doesn't really need to be understood, but it just needs the right environment that it can express or grow or bloom, analogously. When I put these notes together, when I think of these existential crisis type situations like solipsism, nihilism, dark night, etc., the clearest thing that came to mind that I think I could offer is, I'm sure I'll think of a better term, but what I'm just calling the backwards factor, which in a nutshell, I have some details, but in a nutshell is you as formlessness, as unconditional love, as infinite being appear, and there is not a process of this. There's not a mechanism of this. There's not ultimately a how of this. There's insights that arise that I've shared, that others share. This is one such insight, so don't take it too literally, but if it sort of is insightful, if it connects dots and locks some things, then great. But I'm just calling it the backwards factor, because one way to look at it is that you appeared, and because you appeared as all of this, you forgot your infinitude and your true nature. So you're essentially in purification, which again is a term that should be taken as a pointer pretty loosely to whatever degree it's helpful. It's as if you are going now backwards. So you're experiencing thoughts and emotions, etc., but you're experiencing them backwards. So if you at least have that consideration when you experience these things, it might make it easier and bring some clarity and relief, I hope. This is why, so a question that arose, if all there is love, why is there this on the path in the purification? Why is there this feeling of loss, of sadness, mourning, even deep sorrow? Why is there this on the path? Going back to the Band-Aid analogy, which is being pulled off, as an analogy for beliefs. Specifically in being separate or there being separation in terms of identity. That Band-Aid was already put on, but you don't know or remember this because putting the Band-Aid on is the same or equals forgetting that you did. That's a tricky thing until you really go full circle and see the other side of it. The Band-Aid's analogous to that infinite being is appearing, and in appearing forgot that it is appearing. So the removal of the Band-Aid is like saying the removal of beliefs and identity based in there being separate physical objects and or separate selves. The difference between the Band-Aid and the actuality is that the beliefs and identity only persist in experience if uninspected, unquestioned. One doesn't literally remove them per se, but inspects and lets go of beliefs. Letting go, then understanding arises, and that is the key to the belief, which is a thought that gets repeated, to it not repeating. It essentially is looking to be aligned with the true nature, and that could be said to require understanding, but even much more so feeling. So if a perspective or a thought keeps coming around again and it doesn't feel good, it is a misunderstanding. It's not quite aligned with truth, and it essentially is not true. And I don't mean this as in infinite being has this idea to forget or a design or plan. I mean very literally, intrinsically, that appearing or being experience is or equals forgetting your own infinitude and forgetting your true nature. Going back to the infant and that explanation or analogy or metaphor, in addition to this, infinite being is the baby, the child, and the adult. Infinite being is told, learns, and believes it is separate. And thus believes that it exists as separate in a world of separate things and separate objects. If you're a parent, by the way, or even grandparent, it's most worthwhile to know what conditioning is and collective conditioning and kind of how it works. And if I have some thoughts or beliefs that don't feel good to me, and I don't question that or do the inner work, if you will, or the alignment work, I would just be passing that on. Which is kind of like saying innocently, unknowingly teaching suffering. So from a bias standpoint, just from a role standpoint as a dad, I hope this insight's allowed to sink in. My 2 cents would be to talk to your kid. While this might sound nuts to some people, talk to your kid like you would talk to God. And maybe even more so, talk to your kids ultimately like you would want to be talked to. With empathy, compassion, hopefully encouragement, with love, in love, as love, to love. And maybe consider in regard to discipline and punishment. And again, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do. I'm just sharing insights. That's the whole point. Sharing. Consider there's infinite perfection. There is eternal perfection. There's only perfection. But there's no perfect person. And when your kid is feeling discord or feeling disconnected from source, they're feeling the suffering, and just consider that might already be enough. And that if your beliefs or identity are triggered, which would look like interrupting, cutting them off, raising your voice, yelling, criticizing, etc., consider that that's very it's very confusing. Because it doesn't really allow kids the space to explore, to learn their emotions. Sorry. Adds a lot of confusion. But again, it's a touchy subject, so I respectfully digress. But I would say it comes to mind, and it's a good feeling insight. And look into the depth of this yourself. But also, don't worry for your kids. Having 3 kids, kids are crazy. They're crazy. I bought a $700 camera to make these videos, and I haven't used it yet because it's missing in the house. And it's it depends what you like, but for me that's it's the greatest thing. So give as much depth to this as you want, but when it comes to things like this, with my kids, I like to think source has really already got them. A little guidance here and there, an example goes a long way. But also there's a lot to be said for that. As my kids, source doesn't need me to really be telling them how to be or what to do, to the extent that I guess that it previously initially seemed. Okay, that's my last parenting comment. It's really not the point here. So back to the Band-Aid, the forgetting and remembering. At this point of believing in identity, we could say that infinite being has bamboozled itself. And the person who used that word, which is arguably my favorite word, has been for a long time, you know who you are, and I appreciate that very much. It's an excellent way to say it. However, there is no other way, precisely because infinite being is infinite. Infinite cannot know finite or, quote, form or separate objects and selves, because there is no such reality of finite or form or separate objects or selves. That really must be taken literal, direct, as the message for you, not just a concept or a figurative, collective message. Infinite being forgets its own infinitude, or puts the band-aid on. So it's kind of backwards. Because infinite being cannot not be infinite being, there is intuition. The best insight I think I've had to describe intuition, it might be something you rewind and listen to again because it takes a minute for it to click, but if you were sitting in a college and you were a student there of that college, and somebody asked you, how did you get into this college? And your answer would be intuition. That intuition was paid, and that's how you got into the college. So you might think about intuition as that connective link back, that now that you are, quote, in the spheres, in experiencing that in the world, that intuition always points to how this came to be, or how you got in here. And it's very much the breadcrumbs in the backwards path that you follow the intuition, listen to the intuition and feeling, and you are oriented back home or back to the true nature. Not that you ever left, but that's usually a more full circle realization after those last breadcrumbs are followed through on. And worth noting, the intuition, in my opinion, I'll say, it's not a thought. It is felt. It seems to be sort of almost a remnant or an echo of feeling, but it is feeling, it is felt. And it also seems to be that intermediary place where feeling or love appears as thoughts. So, intuition is to try to distinguish it from thoughts. It's just more felt, and it's feeling is love, is knowingness, not the knowing of knowledge or the knowing of things, but knowingness. So hopefully that the association of those words helps to bring about a stronger intuition or feeling of it. So removing the band-aid is experiencing the putting on of the band-aid, but backwards. This might not make any sense at first, but it might tomorrow, it might if you watch this part of the video again. The last of appearance could be said to be the appearance of the finite mind, or the beliefs, or the identity. The letting go of this can be difficult and uncomfortable because one is not used to experiencing inwardly backwards. Prior to getting on the path, one wouldn't understand this were even a thing or even possible. To the extent one is identified via self-referential thoughts, and there's a page, a tool, a contemplation on my website in that regard, if you want to look more into that. Identified as a physical object or separate self, one experiences a more or less difficult path, namely emotionally. If you recall the first thing that was said in this video, unconditional love appears, and that appearance is referred to as infinite mind. This means all perception is an appearance. I find I'm particular about using the word appearance and not illusion because of the implication of what's behind it, so to speak. But just to be clear, what I am saying points to that all perception is an appearance and all thought is an appearance. Emotion is where it gets tricky, and in my experience and in my opinion, what is most difficult to understand and to directly experience backwards. Forwards, or as you are used to it in appearance or in appearing and in experiencing from baby to adult, concepts and ideas are created which explain emotions, which in large part is entangled with identity, which sounds like so-and-so made me feel this way, or that way, I made so-and-so feel this way and that way. This experience and that experience felt this way or that way. I am who I am because of those experiences. But again, what I'm proposing here is that all thought, including those, are an appearance. That there is no true thought or true thoughts. It's never happened, it's never going to happen, because all thoughts are an appearance. That which is appearing as thoughts is the truth, or infinite being, or unconditional love. Different words which all point to that which truly at the end of the day is just completely ineffable, or complete and ineffable. All of this is completely, absolutely innocent. No one is actually harmed, as there is actually only infinite being or unconditional love, which is what is ultimately realized in this backwardsness of the path. And also recall the forgetting factor. To put it simply, for the sake of clarity, you forgot that you appear as the universe. Notice the veiling nature of the very word as you say it. The word universe says one verse. That one verse is the word universe. As soon as it leaves your lips, you believe that there is one. And in a behind-the-scenes way, you indirectly are believing that you are separate from it, or that you are a part inside of it. It's a tricky word. You have the option of suffering through life to whatever extent you suffer or don't, and when you croak, so to speak, then there is no veil. And what is being said here as a pointer to the truth is then fully and infinitely obvious. If there was a word that meant more than obvious, I would use it. Fill in that word if you know it. You can also inspect suffering and untangle feeling and thought, which is what emotions are. Feeling as in sensation, or in the raw sense of love, or that there is feeling. And when I say love, I acknowledge that might not have been in the feeling sense realized or discovered yet. But essentially what emotion is the raw clay of love, unconditional love, and thoughts, which are the not separate, but the very appearance of love. And I have come to call this part of the path, or of life, however you'd like to look at it, or of this experience of a lifetime, this going around, as the flip. So the flip is from child to adult in a spiritual or actual sense. A child justifiably feels how they feel because of the world, because of their environment and relationships, but an adult can realize they are in charge and in control of how they feel. An adult can inspect beliefs, inspect their own misunderstandings, and they feel the discord of these beliefs and misunderstandings, and they can inspect that and align, instead of expecting to feel a certain way while believing certain things are being right or holding certain perspectives. An adult can reverse that, which again seems very backwards, I think, to most. But to be really, really clear, what does that sound like? It sounds like thoughts and perspectives and beliefs being as fluid and allowing them to just simply come and go like you would pairs of shoes. So it's no longer expecting to believe certain things, hold certain perspectives, and feel a certain way, which is trying to align feeling to your thoughts. It's a full backwards reversal of that. It might even be more clear to say, who cares what you think? I don't care what I think. I don't care what you think. I love myself and I love you. Thoughts, light, it's for communication. It's for creating stuff. It's for ideas. It's not for, in my opinion, it's not really for identity. And again, self-referential thoughts, I've mentioned that. That's on my website. You can check that out. The path is an endeavor which understanding emotions serves tremendously. Before you experience emotions backwards on the path, it is very helpful to have clarity on the emotions as experienced ordinarily or forwards. Whether you peel that band-aid off slowly or rip it off quickly or experience some of each, understanding the emotions you are experiencing serves you very well. Without inspecting thoughts, beliefs, and identity and understanding emotions, the same thoughts, beliefs, and identity arise again and again, like a band-aid that was removed, but slowly, day by day, is being put on again. And without emotional clarity, this peeling off and putting back on can wreak havoc on your body and on your health, your well-being, on your life, on your endeavors, and on your relationships. So again, emotional understanding, really can't emphasize that enough. Expression and emotional understanding are most fundamental. And there's another tool called the emotional scale on my website. I strongly suggest that you give that a read a couple times. Namely looking for when certain thoughts about you don't feel good. That is an inward orientation of thoughts as far as what they're about. And though it goes back and forth on the emotional scale, the low end of the emotional scale, the emotions that are just really no fun at all, are thoughts about yourself, which yourself cannot go there with, cannot align with. So the shift to thinking about your experience as in the emotion I'm experiencing, rather than this thought about myself, the emotion I'm experiencing. It takes the pressure off you, it gives you space, and now that the orientation is outward, you are now understanding your experience, and then over time you begin to understand the importance of letting thoughts go that don't feel good, and how thoughts that do feel good just arise of their own nature. And then you start to be able to recognize that you've been creating your emotions all along. Again, I you don't have to, but obviously, but I hold a distinction between expecting this of kids. There's a certain maturity that happens where this can then be seen as far as one creating one's own emotions. No one likes to feel not great. Really consider that for a minute. We all share that. I mean, there's exceptions of certain endeavors, but by and large, this is an inherent situation that everyone likes to feel great and nobody likes to feel not great. It's because that which is appearing as everyone is unconditional love. So don't take for granted that there is feeling, and don't take for granted that there is feeling great and not great. It's the very breadcrumbs. Feeling itself is the backwards path or the breadcrumbs home. There is the experience of suffering because it is unconditional love, the greatest possible feeling, which is believing thoughts and beliefs about itself. Some thoughts are contrary or are in discord with love, and some thoughts are in harmony or aligned, feel great, and are indicative of the true nature of reality, being love. It is because unconditional love is the creator of all that is, by being the appearance of all that is, that thoughts about yourself often do not feel good and create the emotions of fear, powerlessness, insecurity, and unworthiness, etc. You are again presented with that same option there. You could ignore and suppress these emotions which feel very off, and that sounds like it's just how I am, it's just the way things are, it's just how my day was, it's just how life is. But I want to at least suggest it's always now. So if you are ever going to recognize that and address that, it's only ever going to happen now. Something in the future isn't going to make sense of that. Something in the future, albeit maybe in exceptions of fleeting ways, otherwise is not by and large going to result in feeling better. In a sense, feeling is not in a future. You can suppress this even when it feels off, even when you're aware of focusing on thoughts about yourself. But you can also listen to the feeling and let the focusing on the discordant thoughts go. Essentially, you are free to say, that does not feel good for me, and therefore it isn't true about me. You're free to do this. No one's checking. Nobody's keeping track. And even if they were, earnestly, at the end of the day, everybody that you know wants the best for you. It doesn't seem like it at times, but they do. Nobody's keeping track of this. Happiness is another word which points to the true nature or infinite being. There are not things which are or are not happy. Happiness is infinite being, being all apparent things. As the creator of all that is, if you focus on the thought that you are not worthy or you are insecure, it is of course going to feel very off. If you instead focus from the mindset of truth that you are creating this experience, you begin to feel better and less stuck. There is somewhere to go, so to speak. Again, the emotional scale, super helpful with this. You begin to realize that you are creating emotions as love as the creator by focusing on thoughts, beliefs, and perspectives. Notice all thoughts and beliefs are arising within you. They are an appearance of you. It's easy to notice thoughts appear and disappear because it happens somewhat quickly, so to speak. As in, you've never spent an entire day with one single thought lodged in your mind, for example. Thoughts come and go readily, naturally, and seemingly quickly. It's not as easy to notice that perception is an appearance because it's very slow compared to thoughts. But all indeed is appearing and disappearing, coming and going. An example that comes to mind is when is an apple an apple? If you consider that the seeds which make the tree come from the apple, it implies a loop if you contemplate that for a moment. And I suggest that it's not a loop at all. It's because it's an appearance, and an appearance cannot have a beginning or an ending because of the nature of it being an appearance. So the seed and the apple tree and the apple and the seeds being in the apple aren't exactly a loop, but are an appearance in the very same way that you don't have a direct experience of being born, although you might and very well probably believe that you were. And you don't have any direct experience whatsoever of death, although you might very well be believing that there is such an event, or that this could happen. Why does it seem like it so much? I don't mean to disrespect or leave that unacknowledged, but all I can really suggest is what I'm making videos about and what I'm talking about here, and inspecting and finding things like perception is always untouched, untainted, untarnished, pure. The believing of thoughts seems to mix them with perception and label things, and our opinions get mixed in, and whether those perspectives and opinions are in discord or in alignment has everything to do with how you're feeling. So again, thoughts, it's a little easier to see that they just simply are magic, ineffable magic, that they appear and disappear. It's not quite as easy to see with perception, but if you scrutinize it and start to sort of detach from the thoughts or the heavy labeling of things, sometimes the neti approach, and you can Google that, which essentially is saying not me, not me, not me, can help. And for some, the complete opposite approach really expands their perception or expands their mind in making it a point to label everything, because it helps you to see that there aren't these separate things, that you've been labeling them all along. As unconditional love appears, it does so by vibrating itself. As it vibrates, experientially, it dilutes itself experientially. As a simple reference, it's like pure water, fully knowing it is water, vibrating, which results in appearing as an ice cube, thus forgetting it is actually water. For an ice cube to get on the path is for an ice cube to melt itself, resulting in being water. Whether water is labeled as water or ice, the water is then fully knowing that it eternally is formless water. In the backwards or going within of the path, in the experiencing of being an ice cube, which is melting, the ice cube experiences sadness, and then more deeply sorrow, and ultimately more deeply pure unconditional love, or what is pointed to with the word non-duality. What makes the path tricky is, again, no one likes to feel not great. This backwards journey at some point does feel not great. But this not great is the emptying out of all notions of not great. It's the emptying of the appearance, which is made out of goodness. So what's really being let go is everything that you don't like to think and feel in terms of how you feel when you think these things. What you're letting go of is, to a large degree, biases, judgments, beliefs about yourself that never resonated, etc. So just to kind of go back to like solipsism, nihilism, these in a way are like bumps in the road, bumps in the path where somebody gets stuck because they are not quite willing to let something go. And it likely is something that is more intimate, more personal, past related. But this is why I mentioned that if you are not experiencing these things, you might want to just skip this video altogether. It might be the very concept that has been used to sort of inflate the sense of self, or the sense of self-image. So it might be the very concept of solipsism or nihilism or the dark night, that the concept just needs to be let go, and that might trigger or allow a release, an emptying. From the perspective of the water, there is unconditional love vibrationally appearing as ice. From the perspective of the ice cube, the apparent perspective, there is death, and it is scary. However, if ice strives to understand death, to transcend death, ice is on a never-ending treadmill of its own carousel of thoughts, which will never end. The transcendence, or seeing through death, or fully realizing or knowing it's just a collective belief, is via the outpouring of the water through the ice, which is the same as saying the ice melting, which is, in leaving this analogy, is the same as talking about expression. Again, opinion, suggestion, the last thing you want to do is suppress and ruminate and hold something in due to resentment or anything of that nature. Expressing it, whether it's on paper or to somebody, or just talking out loud by yourself, just getting it out, expressing any which way is really the way to go, is very, very key. And I want to also say in the most practical language possible, I am suggesting in this water pouring out through the ice cube, I'm saying bring the love that you are into this world that you are, every which way, every single day, for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your neighbors, for your strangers, for your enemies, for everything. And get straight about the life that you want to create and experience, and get focusing on it and revel in the wonder of it unfolding. It will. To me, expressing and not suppressing is the path, or the real ice melting. Not any event, not any insight, not what anybody tells you, and even not any experience. Some specific tools that are on my website, I just want to make a quick mention. They might come in handy. Expressive journaling, I kind of have covered. That's very, very helpful. Improv writing is something that I never would have thought of until it arose one day, and I put a little short verbiage on there. I have found that, I'll say this briefly, I found that a lot of people have been focusing on what they don't want so much that they actually are at a loss for what they do want. I always suggest write down a list of what you don't want, and that's usually very easy to do from that position or perspective. Then take a break from it, do something that feels good to you, that's light and fun and enjoyable. Then come back to that list and simply write whatever comes to mind is the opposite of each thing next to it, and you now have a list of everything you want. And then get a big dry erase board, which I call a dream board, and fill it up with all that stuff, and keep it, again, front and center so that you see it every day, making it very, very easy to begin to shift from any inner world focusing and emotional discord in relation to what you don't want, or motives or motivations to avoid that. And there's a shift to what you've put on your dream board, which is what you want, which is synonymous with saying what feels good to you. You have to try it though. It's very direct experience oriented. Thinking about it doesn't amount to anything. If you give it a try though, I think you'll really, really like what you discover. So back to the backwards. When we go backwards, inward on the path, a lot comes up and out. Thoughts and emotions arise and can be very convincing and concerning. The habit of reaction is to believe the thoughts, which usually results in roping someone else in, or making it about someone else or something else or some other time. The perhaps counterintuitive approach is the way to properly address this. No one else need be involved. Again, needs a very tricky word. Though get help if you want, or feel that you need help, obviously. It can be most helpful to have someone to talk to, not someone who is an authority per se. I'm not suggesting that, just some guidance, or really just a friend, a listener. What is most important is the expressing of that which arises emotionally, in comparison or instead of incessant thinking, ruminating, or suppression. There are also tools for that on my website as well. One's called streaming that comes to mind. The improv writing. I don't know if I got around to that after the dream board. The golden rule of improv is you never say no. You always say yes and. So if somebody's experiencing chronic tension, chronic anxiety, or what they might describe as a lack of feeling, or even if they're feeling a lack of feeling fullness, improv writing can be exceptionally great for that, because it's the easiest thing. You just start writing, and then whatever's coming next, you write yes and, yes and, yes and. And if you've ever seen the movie with Jim Carrey, Yes Man, it's an inner world kind of experience like that. And then what seems to be the outer world very much does begin to change in a very delightful, synchronistic, serendipitous way. And that really doesn't even it doesn't really even begin to or do it justice. All of what I'm saying might be summed up by saying that it is, the intention is to align thought to feeling through the emptying out of conditioning, and what results is a profound knowing of your being, your true nature, and a profound understanding of emotions, and a life to follow in which you are creating them, not captive to them. The dark night of the soul. To me, this is that period of the emptying out of the false identity as a separate self. Hence, it's called the dark night of the soul, not the dark night of infinite being. For one with a strong foundation of a practice such as meditation or yoga, the thoughts which could otherwise be very enticing are allowed to freely come and go, and all emotions experienced are allowed to be experienced and to come and go. This, with the proper foundation, even dark night, is a joyful, though there are many, many tears, it's an underlying getting to know the truth or your being or love. It's an underlying joyful experience of freedom, or you might say knowing God. And when I'm using the terms love or God or infinite being, they're all synonymous in that they point to what really cannot be communicated. A daily practice, especially in the morning, is a game changer in that way. So again, going back to psychedelics, it's not the substance. There's nothing wrong with psychedelics whatsoever. Entire books I'm sure are written on just how right everything is with psychedelics. But if you don't have a foundation, of meditation every morning, or yoga or breath work or something, if you have not been expressing and you try a substance that is very suddenly eye-opening, you, in my experience from what I've seen, you become very prone to things like nihilism, solipsism, or the dark night of the soul versus a very joyful experience. Am I in a literal scientific sense making even a correlation? No, I'm not. But just like you might, from anything you've been doing for years, you're sharing, this is what I've seen, and the only reason I'm sharing it is if it's helpful or useful. As they say, life is a buffet. If it's not for you, if it's not helpful, if it's not useful, leave it on the buffet. Also, should be said that the combination of a suppressed trauma, whether someone's aware of that or not, and tries psychedelics, that can certainly bring that up, and they might not be realizing what's going on. But it is, I guess I'm mentioning it because it is good to know. And again, it's always one-off, as in no two paths are the same, no two memories are the same, no two traumas are the same, no two trips are the same. So if you have questions, if there's something intimate or personal you're concerned about or something, you can send me an email and I'll give you my 2 cents on it. But I can't really say a whole lot more because there isn't many blanket statements other than that that I find really apply. A point, just a little bit more here on this video. I want to kind of go back a bit and add a point about bias and the path by and large. If somebody went it alone, and I'm so to speak one of those somebodies, then they're very inclined to preach the going alone. If somebody got help or did self-realization with others, or had a guide or a teacher or a guru or whatever word you would like to call it, then they're very, very inclined, if they became self-realized, realized the true nature, they're very inclined to suggest that way. So keep that in mind. And how do those two collapse, or how are they the same thing? if you willfully, you might even think of it as expression, seek out help or ask for help, you're not necessarily dependent on somebody. You're literally helping yourself, just like you would be with any other course of action. But again, that's really, whether that's, true or accurate is really very much up to you and what you experience. Why someone else can be very helpful, though, is because they don't have your beliefs. So I'm sure you've experienced this at some point. We all kind of do, but something that might seem stressful, very complicated, and you might feel stuck or very tangled up into somebody else that does not have that belief, they might be able to help simply because they don't have the same perspective, which might help you to see in a way from the perspective of not having the whatever particular specific relative beliefs that you have. That can be, I've witnessed this to be exceptionally helpful when there's sort of that perfect storm of solipsism, nihilism, or the dark night, and psychedelics, and there hasn't been much expression, and they haven't sought out someone to talk to. Then all of a sudden, it seems to be insanely refreshing to spend some time with, have a conversation with, hear from somebody who has either already experienced this and can speak from that perspective, or who just doesn't have any acknowledgement in terms of belief or identity with these things. Hopefully I'm making a point there. If you express and inspect alone or with somebody, you really can't lose. Both are probably the best way to go, but again, totally up to you. That is about what I want to cover. So I very much appreciate, I got a lot of messages asking for more videos. As I mentioned earlier, doing the animations is very, it's just flat out fun, and it seems like it's like a way better experience, I think, as a viewer than just listening to me talk, because it also is illustrative, and the video that I did in the past that had some animation was very basic, to say the least. So I'm getting into like actual animation software that's so those videos are coming along. But the messages that I've received from people wanting videos and suggesting topics, etc., I very much thank you and appreciate that. If you like this content, click like and subscribe. Ultimately, does it matter? No, not really. But I think in a way what it really boils down to is, if you want other people to hear what you're watching, if you want to share it, that is the way to do it. That's how the algorithms seem to work. So consider that. And also, this occurred to me yesterday in talking with somebody. Subscribing to a channel on YouTube, you can unsubscribe later. It almost seems to imply that you're subscribing to something you're going to be paying for. It. Maybe they could have used a different word, I don't know, because it does kind of imply that. But in case you don't know that, you can subscribe to a channel and you just get that channel's videos when they post them, and it doesn't cost anything, and you can unsubscribe anytime you want. Want to leave you with some kind of final thoughts as pointings in regard to unconditional love. Initially, I think thoughts come to mind when we hear unconditional love that this implies something about your separate self, or your self, as in you need to be more loving, or you need to love even the worst of things, or even the quote bad people, or your enemies, etc., etc. That's not a bad way to go, but I want to suggest that's not really what I'm trying to communicate, or what the impression that I'm trying to give. It doesn't really mean that you per se need to love or be unconditionally loving. So if that's the connotation that you've got, if that's what the word unconditional love brings to mind for you, let's ditch those words, unconditional love, for a minute, and just take a second, whether you're, if you're driving, focus on the driving, but if you are inside, indoors, or outside, take a minute now and focus on perception and feeling, and notice the term that comes to mind for me, the three primary colors, or it could be said accurately that this whole experience can be broken down no more in terms of communication and the duality of communication. It can be broken down no more than thoughts, perception, as in seeing and hearing, and feeling. Shift to the thought of feeling the energy, the thought of just turn the energy on, kind of where you're at, so to speak. That might sound corny or ridiculous. Give it a try though, in earnest. Just hold the thought, turn the energy on. See if you notice a difference. Then just focus on seeing and hearing and really dial into it. See, there's not just a handful of colors. There's a huge spectrum of colors. See little things, see big things. Notice that things seem close and things seem far away. Really go into perception and seeing. Same with hearing. Hear little nuanced sounds. Hear bigger, wider sounds. Scrutinize how far away are you hearing. If you're outside and you're hearing birds, as I am through the windows, consider how many birds are you hearing? What's the furthest away that one of these birds is? What's the closest one of these? How many different bird songs or chirpings are you hearing? Really dial into seeing and hearing and feeling, and starting with the sensation in the bottom of your feet. It's an easy way to recognize the presence of feeling or sensation, and then work your way up. Is there feeling in my legs? And it's met with a direct awareness of, so to speak, feeling. And the same with your hips, your back, your arms, your neck, your head. Check for it, and sure enough, it registers and it is there. As you do, you're essentially doing that thing of turning off thoughts by focusing on perception and feeling. All the attention is going there, and you're feeling much more present. And the more you do it, I think the more you will agree that the better it feels. And let the term, as you're looking into perception, as you're hearing, as you're feeling, let the term unconditional love go completely, as if it's something of old, something you never heard. And consider these words. And if you're looking at me, stop looking at me and start looking at whatever else, perception. And consider these are other words that point, are synonymous pointers, or are pointing to the exact same no thing previously referred to as unconditional love. Don't think about it. Look for this. Listen for this. Feel for this. Awareness, consciousness, formlessness, infinite, eternal, magical, mystical, ordinary, what is, no thing, nothing, nothingness, emptiness, fullness.